Now to our new reporting night on the Russia case. Many people talk about this inquiry as an issue of collusion.
The ongoing investigation into Trump associates and their potential collusion.
What we want to show, collusion, coordination.
Whether we're going to be able to demonstrate collusion.
Director, the term we hear most often is collusion.
Collusion has become sort of this shorthand for the problem. But collusion's not a federal crime. Bob Mueller is investigating specific felonies, actions like hacking or criminal conspiracy.
The hacking of American institutions by a foreign power is a crime.
And that term is conspiracy. There could be a potential conspiracy charge against any one of them or all of them.
So in this theory of the case, the potential crime involves basically action coming from Russia to the U.S., like Russians hacking in here, or maybe Americans helping them do it. There's another theory of the case, though. Legal experts telling The Beat tonight that Mueller's investigators may use an obscure federal law to probe action coming from the U.S. towards other countries. And this anti-corruption law prohibits bribing foreign officials with money or giving them something valuable. Breaking that corruption law carries up to 20 years in jail. The law makes it illegal for an American to bribe, say, people in China, which is something, this law, that Trump used to rail against.
What are we prosecuting people to keep China honest? Now, every other country goes into these places and they do what they have to do. It's a horrible law and it should be changed. I mean, we're like the policeman for the world. It's ridiculous.
Congress didn't think it was ridiculous. It made the U.S. the policeman for the world, which gives these prosecutors extra power. And we can tell you tonight, Mueller has hired 2 prosecutors with specific experience using this very law, Andrew Weissman and Greg Andres. And here's what else is new. Recent reports showing that Paul Manafort offered private briefings to a Russian oligarch during the 2016 campaign, an offer linked to a contentious business deal, and newly leaked emails indicating Manafort pitched that secret plan to Oleg Deripaska. Now, the State Department says he's one of the top 3 oligarchs that Putin uses. Now, let's be clear. That alone would not provide enough evidence that Manafort broke any law. Prosecutors would have to go further and prove an illicit deal for the Kremlin and Deripaska representing the Kremlin. But in our reporting, legal experts tell The Beat that Mueller's team could have the evidence to actually make that case in 2 ways. One, that the DOJ has long said you can break this law just by bribing someone close to a foreign government, that the foreign official doesn't have to mean a technical employee, that it's much broader. And 2, experts say that Russia issued Deripaska a diplomatic passport, and he himself has said under oath that he's represented the Kremlin abroad before. So this new theory of the case could pursue Manafort for reaching out to Russia rather than pursuing him for how Russia maybe reached out to the U.S. And all of that could be potential leverage for Mueller, though it's no easy case. Now, I spoke to Manafort aide Jason Maloney about all of this today, and he said Paul Manafort did not collude with the Russian government to undermine the 2016 election, and it's no secret Mr. Manafort was owed money by past clients after his work ended in 2014, adding this exchange is innocuous. As for anti-corruption laws, Maloney suggested there's no briefing or thing of value that was given to Deripaska, and then he added, I think facetiously, Paul is not responsible for the sinking of the ships in the Bermuda Triangle. I'm joined now by Ken Delaney, an NBC's intelligence and national security reporter who has been on this case for a while, Barbara McQuaid, a former federal prosecutor, and William Steinman is an expert on this anti-corruption law who teaches at George Washington University Law School. Welcome to all of you. Ken, talk about the facts, and then I'm going to ask Barbara to give us the legal analysis.
Right, Ari. Well, I think you guys have done a great job at the legal team of putting a spotlight on this, because what's really intriguing about this Deripaska Manafort situation is that Oleg Deripaska, as you said, he's an oligarch with close ties to Vladimir Putin, but he's also something else. Since 2011, he's been a diplomat representing the Russian government with an official title. Now, that may have been a way, some believe, for him to get around a ban. He was banned from the United States over his ties to organized crime. So he comes here on a diplomatic passport representing the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. That's an international body in New York. But that makes him an official of the Russian government. Now we have these emails that show that Paul Manafort, while he was campaign chairman back in the summer, last summer, offered private briefings on the inner workings of the Trump campaign. Could those things be construed as a thing of value under this anti-corruption law? And what was Manafort seeking in return? Well, he said something cryptically in an email about wanting to be made whole. Well, we know that Deripaska had given Manafort $19 million for investment purposes and then was coming after an accounting of that money in the Cayman Islands, and there's no evidence that that case has been closed. So the question is, was there a corrupt arrangement here? That seems to be something that Mueller would be interested in. And given that this law carries a 20-year prison sentence, it seems like it's a big point of leverage, even if it is, as you said, a novel legal interpretation of the law.
Right. And Barbara, we know that on the list of federal laws, because they're not investigating collusion, they're investigating potential felonies and intelligence issues. And under the felonies, obviously you start with the hacking. We've had reports of obstruction. But you go down this list and you look at someone like Greg Andres, not a household name, but someone that Mueller tapped. I want to show you him testifying about how they've used this law to put people in jail.
We're also vigorously pursuing individual defendants who violate the FCPA. We do not hesitate to seek jail terms for these offenders when appropriate. The department has made the prosecution of individuals a critical part of its FCPA enforcement strategy. We understand well that it is an important and effective deterrent.
That man now working for Mueller. Barbara, give us your view of all this.
Yeah, so the statute is the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. It was enacted in 1977, and the goal is not, as President Trump says, to be the policeman for the world. It is to level the playing field for U.S. businesses. Businesses who play by the rules find themselves at a competitive disadvantage if people are allowed to bribe foreign officials to do business in foreign countries. And so in an effort to deter that kind of behavior, to level the playing field, it's a crime. And there is vigorous enforcement, has been at least, at the Justice Department when people are paying bribes to engage in business in a foreign country. And that can include not only cash, which is what we traditionally think of these bribes, but the statute is broader than that, includes the phrase thing of value. So as we heard, it could be a presidential briefing. It could be access to the president. It could be a visa, which we know this oligarch was seeking to get into the United States. So there are a lot of ways that that statute could be violated. And so I think there are enough smoke here for Mueller and his team to be investigating a violation of this statute.
William, you are an expert on this law. We've relied on some of your expertise in our reporting here. How do you view this, given the public leaks and the fact pattern around Manafort? Because, again, in fairness, what his folks were telling me today is people owed us money and we didn't even do anything. How do you square that with the potential way that someone like Greg Andres, this tough prosecutor that Mueller's hired, might look at this issue?
Well, a couple of finer points about the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Under the statute, the Manafort team wouldn't have actually had to give a briefing. It's enough under the statute that they offered the briefing. Again, something of value, doesn't have to be limited to money. And the statute also...
Let's pause on that, William.
Sure.
You're saying that just the offer is enough for prosecutors to pursue?
That's correct. That's correct. So the statute sets forth that giving something of value can be prosecuted, but also offering something of value. So whether it's that valuable briefing, access to folks in the campaign, information itself, all of these things, things of value, just offering it directly or indirectly can be problematic.
And so, Ken, when you look at that and what Paul Manafort was doing, this is not the first time, of course, that he's worked with foreign officials. His argument would be, I'm in business with people representing foreign governments. That itself is not illegal, and people knew about that.
That's right. I think one of the key questions here is, did Deripaska have the capacity to cause the Russian government to grant Manafort a favor in any way in terms of the money he was owed or the Deripaska investment? Was that connected to the government? I mean, the lawyers would be better suited to speak to this. And then I'll just throw out that Manafort also worked for other foreign governments over the years, including in the developed world, including places like Kenya and Nigeria, where bribery is rampant. So there's a potential that, some of those entanglements are being looked at under the statute as well, Ari.
And so, Barbara, how does Mueller do this? For folks watching at home, thinking about you as someone who used to be a federal prosecutor, Is it a checklist? You say, I got 4 potential violations, but some are stronger than others. How does this all really go down if it is part of the scrutiny they're doing?
Yeah, certainly. For every one of those statutes that they're looking at, whether it's Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, fraud, money laundering, campaign finance laws, they would break down those statutes and look at the elements of each offense and see what kind of evidence they have to satisfy each of those elements. I'm sure the teams get together. They've probably divided the work based on the different statutes that they're looking at, and they would be looking at documents, interviews with witnesses. I'm sure the emails that we have heard about are part of the evidence in the case. And don't forget, there's also been reporting that Manafort was the subject of some FISA coverage. So there may be intercepted conversations, intercepted emails that can be used to show evidence to support the elements of those offenses. So at the end of the day, they'll make an assessment about whether they have sufficient evidence to have a reasonable likelihood of success at trial. That's the standard before they would go forward on choosing which, if any, of those statutes that they would prosecute.
Barbara McQuaid, Ken Delanian, and William Steinman, thank you for walking us through this really interesting stuff. Now to our new reporting night on the Russia case. Many people talk about this inquiry as an issue of collusion.
The ongoing investigation into Trump associates and their potential collusion.
What we want to show, collusion, coordination.
Whether we're going to be able to demonstrate collusion.
Director, the term we hear most often.
And this anti-corruption law prohibits bribing foreign officials with money or giving them something valuable. Breaking that corruption law carries up to 20 years in jail. The law makes it illegal for an American to bribe, say, people in China, which is something, this law, that Trump used to rail against.
What are we prosecuting people to keep China honest? Now, every other country goes into these places and they do what they have to do. It's a horrible law and it should be changed. I mean, we're like the policemen for the world. It's ridiculous.
Congress didn't think it was ridiculous. It made the U.S. the policeman for the world, which gives these prosecutors extra power. And we can tell you tonight, Mueller has hired 2 prosecutors with specific experience using this very law, Andrew Weissman and Greg Andres. And here's what else
is collusion.
Collusion has become sort of this shorthand for the problem. But collusion's not a federal crime. Bob Mueller is investigating specific felonies, actions like hacking or criminal conspiracy.
The hacking of American institutions by a foreign power is a crime.
And that term is conspiracy. There could be a potential conspiracy charge against any one of them or all of them.
So in this theory of the case, the potential crime involves basically action coming from Russia to the U.S., like Russians hacking in here, or maybe Americans helping them do it. There's another theory of the case, though. Legal experts telling The Beat tonight that Mueller's investigators may use an obscure federal law to probe action coming from the U.S. towards other countries.